Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our presentation. My name is Laura Crawford, and I will be presenting today's topic, in which we'll be discussing Microsoft Project 2013, Scheduling for Success. For today's agenda, we're going to talk about Intigent. For those of you that may have been joining our webinars in the past, you may have noticed that we have a name change here. So if you haven't been with us in the past couple of months, we're still the same company, formerly known as MS Project Now, but we have a new name, Intigent, to reflect some of the expansion of some of our services. So we still are focusing on Project Server and Microsoft Project, but in addition to that, we're also expanding into CRM, Microsoft Dynamics, and also Azure. So for those of you that are using Project Online and want to expand some of your reporting capabilities, we'd be happy to host a SQL Server for you in Azure. So feel free to ask us about that information. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our company. We're also going to jump into the agenda, which is defining the project and entering task updates. From there, we'll enter estimates, dependencies, and constraints. We'll define and assign resources. And then we'll also identify the critical path and talk about ways to track progress and how to properly update your project. And then at the very end, we are going to go ahead and take some Q&A. All right, so for introductions, let me just give you a brief introduction of who we are. This is not our team in its entirety, of course, but I just wanted to give you an overview of our managing director, Daniel Bell. He founded our company, and he's been working with project management industry, focusing on Project Server since the very beginning, Project Central back in 2000. So he's been doing this for more than 15 years. You can see that we both have quite a few certifications here. I am the Director of Project Delivery. Again, if you missed my name at the very beginning, my name is Laura Crawford. I also have quite a few certifications here. We live, eat, and breathe in Project Server, if you will. We actually drink from the well. So since I started learning about Project Server and Microsoft Project, I have been filling out a timesheet every week. I actually create project plans in Project Professional, update them on a regular basis. I run some reports in Project Server as well. So we're very familiar with the tool. Not only am I a Microsoft certified trainer, but because I actually use this tool on a regular basis, I'm able then to provide some real-world consulting tips for you. All right, so a little bit about us, though. We are a Microsoft Gold partner for both project and portfolio management and cloud platform. That's a big feather in our cap. We have to maintain a lot of competencies to achieve that and also receive some recommendations from our customers as well. So we're very proud of that. All right, to give you an idea of what we do, we are a Microsoft consulting partner. So we provide Project Server and online enterprise project management services. Within that, we can do custom integration, development, define business intelligence reports for you, set up SSRS reports if needed. We also now are expanding into Dynamics, CRM, Office 365, and then SharePoint as well as it relates to Project Server. And this is also just a sample of our customer listing, shameless plug there, to some of our current customers. Okay, so let me just kind of talk about a little bit, enough about me, right? You joined not to hear about what I do and my accomplishments, but to figure out some scheduling success within Microsoft Project. We have defined 8 steps to scheduling success, and that's what we're going to be covering for the next hour. So you'll see here that they've been broken down. The first part is defining the project, entering the task, estimating work and duration, setting task dependencies, setting constraints and deadlines, and then we'll define and assign resources. We'll analyze the critical path, and then we'll enter progress information for our projects. All right, so one more slide, and then I'm going to actually exit out of my slide presentation because we're going to just jump right into the tool. All right, so let me just go ahead and drag this out of my way, if you will. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and expand project a little bit bigger here. Okay, so what I've gone ahead and done is open an app a project. This is a project that has some updates in it already. But I wanted to show you that when you're initially getting started within project, and if I wanted to just create a blank project, which I'll do as well. So I could go to my backstage here, clicking File New, and opening up a blank project, the very first step that I'll want to do is actually define that project. All right, so I want to give my project a start date. All right, I'm not going to come in here and type in a start date. I could if I was to select this calendar drop down here, but that's not the proper way of setting a start date for your project here. What you want to do is you want to go to the Project tab. So I display my project ribbon. And then from here, if I click on project information, you'll see here that I have a start date field. It will default to today's date, but of course, when you're creating a project plan, you're not necessarily going to kick this project off today. You're just building out your initial schedule. You're trying to determine your project scope at this point, maybe trying to determine who the resources even are, and you're not going to be ready to start this project right here on this Wednesday. Maybe it's 2 weeks from now. So I could go ahead and select a date that's 2 weeks from now, and then if I go ahead and click OK, it'll go ahead and apply that start date. All right. The reason why I did not want to, let me drag this out a little bit or double click to expand the width. You'll see here the reason why I did not want to type in a date here is I'm actually setting a constraint on the project start date. It's not the correct way. You want to avoid always typing in start and finish dates in here. And as we go through the 8 steps of scheduling success, I'll point out ways to drive these start and finish dates without actually having to type in information in the start and finish date here. Okay, so that's the first step, defining my project start date. There are some other things that I'll need to define as well. One of them in this project information dialog box, close out of here a little too quickly, is to set my calendar, excuse me. Right now you'll see there's a standard. If I click on this, you can see that there are some testing calendars that we use in our dev environment. If you've created calendars, if you're using Project Standard, you would be creating a calendar directly in Project. If you're using Project connected to Project Server, either Project Online or a on-premise solution using Project Professional, your administrators have already created those calendars for you, and they'd be visible here in this drop-down. The standard calendar, once applied to this particular project, is going to not schedule work to occur during our scheduled days off. So any holidays that we have upcoming, the next one for us would be Thanksgiving and the day after Thanksgiving. Once I apply the calendar to my project will not schedule tasks to occur during that time period. All right, so I've gone ahead, I've given it a start date, I've told the project what calendar to use so that all tasks will be scheduled according to this calendar. The default for the calendar, by the way, assumes that there's a 40-hour work week. Saturday and Sunday are typically non-working days. It also assumes an 8 to 5 work day and 20 working days in the month. All right, so that's what your standard calendar will also include. All right, so from here, I also could set a status date if I wanted to. We'll talk a little bit about this later on at the very end of our presentation. So I'm not going to go ahead and get into status date just now. So again, I could click OK. I already have the calendar applied here, but I'll go ahead and click OK. So those are the first 2 things that I need to define my project. Give it a start date and apply a calendar. Some of the other things that I'll want to also do is determine the task mode for my project. What I mean by task mode is, do I want my project tasks to be manually scheduled or auto-scheduled? I do strongly encourage you to use auto-scheduling. There is a powerful scheduling engine created here for Project, and you want Project to do the work for you. You want it to auto-schedule those tasks for you. As we add tasks to our project plan and give it duration and work estimate, and then also create some dependencies, Project will determine the start and finish dates for you. Manually scheduling means that you are actually telling Project when things should should start and when things should finish. Not a big deal if you have a very small project plan, but if I have hundreds of tasks in a project plan, that's an awful lot of work. It is technically using projects sort of like Excel, and instead of using it as project, as designed. All right, so auto scheduling would be the way to go. The way I would set that is if I come to my File tab over here to get to the Backstage again. So I clicked on my File tab, and if I scroll to the very bottom, you'll see Options. So File, Options. All right, so there are a lot of options that you could set within here for display, general options, scheduling, and advanced options as well. To set my task mode, that is going to be on the schedule page within the file options. So if you're new to Microsoft Project, you'll become more familiar with where these options are. I encourage you to come in here every once in a while and poke around and see what options you have available to change. But you can see here now, new task created, auto scheduled. This is important because it says new task. So if I had already built out my project schedule and I wanted to switch it from auto to manual scheduling, it's not going to change what's already existing in my project plan if I had some tasks already created here, but it would change the scheduling from tasks going forward. I'm going to leave this as auto-scheduled because, again, I want project to do the work for me. I don't want to have to try and determine the start and finish dates for all the tasks in my project plan. But this is where I would go ahead and to set that for my project. Also note here, scheduling options for this project. If you are constantly coming back in here to make some changes to the options for your project, you'll note here if I open this up, I also see that other project that I have open in the background, but you can also see that another option is all new projects. If I select all new projects, every time I open Project Pro or Project Standard, these options will be applied. So going forward, every time I open a brand new project or create a brand new project, whatever settings I've come in here and adjusted and taken that time to do will be carried through for all new projects here. All right, so if you want to make it so that every single project is always auto-scheduled, you would select that. Okay, if you just want to apply the settings to the project that you are currently in, leave it as is. All right, so that's setting the task mode, again, auto-scheduling or manually scheduling. The next thing that I want to do is set the task type for my project. You'll see here the default task type is fixed units, so you may not have even given this much thought, but there are actually 3 different task types in project. There's fixed units, fixed duration, and fixed work. The scheduling engine looks at a formula, and the formula is work is equal to duration times units. So what this is doing is giving you the option of locking down one of the variables in that formula so that if you're fixing your units, if you adjust your duration, you would anticipate that your work changes and not your units. So you need to take some time to determine what type of project default task type works for your organization. As a consultant, we typically create our projects using a fixed work task type because I am creating a project plan based on a statement of work. Once I have received a signed statement of work and I have said that it's going to take me 20 hours to configure project server, I cannot then change the work in my project plan. I need to stick with what was in that statement of work. So I would use a fixed work task type there. Okay, but we can address some questions regarding task types at the end of the session. This actually could be an hour-long session in and of itself. Anybody that's used to working within Microsoft Project, if you're adding resources to tasks in your project plan and your work is recalculating, you may be very frustrated and not even understand that that's why that's happening because of the task type behind the scenes. All right, so the default is fixed units. Fixed units means that you're never going to adjust either the percentage of allocation that someone is assigned to tasks in the project or maybe the skill set that's required to complete the task. All right, so that is the default setting here in the Backstage. So the next thing that I could do is, again, we've given our project a start date, a calendar. We've gone ahead and chosen our task mode and also our default task type here. Once I've done that, I could go ahead and click on OK to save my changes. If I didn't make any changes and left them at the default settings, I could go ahead and click Cancel here, but OK would save those changes to that page there. All right, so now that we've gone ahead and we've defined that basic information for our project, the next thing we're going to do is start entering tasks in our project plan. So there's a couple of different ways that we can do this. Those of you that are familiar with project and those of you that are new, you'll probably learn that there are usually at least 3 different ways to do any given function within Microsoft Project. So as you get more familiar with the tool, you'll decide what is the easiest or maybe what's the most comfortable method for you. So I'll try and show you a couple of different ways to do things, and then as you become more familiar with it, you'll decide what works best for you. So the first thing that we'll need to do is start building our outline structure or adding tasks, creating those tasks in here. I want to show you something. If I go ahead and click on my Format tab before I start adding tasks, there is a little checkbox over here on the right-hand side of the ribbon that is a project summary task. And I want to point that out to you because this is your summary row 0. All right, I have not named my project, so it's defaulting to project 1. Once I save this project initially, it'll ask me to give it a name. But you'll see here, now I have this summary row 0. This is important because everything that I type in after this will roll up to the summary row. So I can see my total duration, my start, and my finish date for my entire project plan. So this is one of those checkboxes that I do recommend that you have selected when you're initially creating your project. And I can also show you where it is here in the backstage. If I go to File Options again, I can actually set it here. This is under the Advanced page though. If I go to Advanced and I scroll all the way down, you'll see Show Project Summary Task has been selected here. So just like I did for the other, under the Scheduling tab, I could check this checkbox and then say, apply this to all new projects. So every time I open project, my Show Project Summary Task will be displayed. All right, I'm going to cancel it out of here since I didn't make any changes. But I'm pointing that out because it never fails that no matter how many experienced project managers I have in a class that may have been using project for a long time, you may have been creating this manually, naming it your project name, and then it further indenting all the tasks underneath it. You don't even have to do that. It's already been done for you, and everything rolls up completely properly when you use that summary row 0. Okay, so now let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go to my task ribbon because we're talking about entering tasks. So any of my task-centric commands will be found on this ribbon here. And you'll see here that I can go ahead and insert a summary task if I wanted to. All right, now my summary task should always be the deliverables. All right, so my summary task could be the name of the deliverable. And then within, underneath the summary task, I can go ahead and insert a new task if I needed to. You'll see that when I'm using these insert buttons that I do have to come back, of course, and type over these to give it a proper name. But that's a quick and easy way to enter summary tasks and subtasks. You'll see how it automatically indented this task underneath it because it knows that this is a summary task up here. I also could insert a milestone in here as well. All right, and you can see the milestone over here on the Gantt chart as the diamond. All right, so you may want to use the insert buttons up here, or you may do what I do and actually just type in the name of your summary task. So if I'm in the design phase of my project, I could come in here and type that in. I'm going to use my outdent button because this is not a part of the phase up top here. All right, so now you'll see that it's been outdented. And then maybe I'm going to have some, if I could spell, architecture sessions. Let's say I'll abbreviate that. Maybe some requirements sessions. let's say define reports. All right, and I could then come in here and highlight these tasks. And again, using my indent or outdent buttons, create my subtasks and my summary tasks here. All right, so I usually prefer to actually type in the name of the summary task and then type in the name of the subtask underneath. That's just my personal preference. Again, you could use these insert buttons. When I'm done, I could say design or design complete. I apologize in advance, not the best typist. All right, there you go. Because I gave this 0 duration, project knows that this is a milestone. Any task with 0 work or duration will be automatically marked as a milestone here. So you can see here that I have a little bit of my work breakdown structure created. All right, again, I have my deliverable up here. All right, I also have the detailed tasks or the things that need to happen in order for me to complete this deliverable. Best practice is to go ahead and insert milestones into your project plan too, to mark the end of the deliverable. All right, and this will be important when we get into the next step and when we're actually talking about predecessors and defining dependencies here. All right, so again, I would strongly encourage you to use the summaries as your deliverables, the subtasks, the detail activities that need to happen in order to complete that. Again, use your milestones in here to signify the completion of that deliverable or the end of that phase. Okay, so once you've gone ahead and you've done that, the next step that you need to do is to go ahead and start thinking about your work and your duration estimates. You'll see here that in the Gantt chart view, I do have duration in here by default, but I always recommend that you also insert the work column. So I just clicked on the name start of the column heading over here, and when you right-click on the column heading, you'll see that there's an insert column. I'm going to just type in a W for work, grab that work column here, because when I'm estimating my tasks in my project plan, I'm estimating both duration and work, because duration is only focusing on the start, the elapsed time between the start and finish of a task, whereas work is the actual hours that were needed to complete that task. So this task might have a duration of 2 weeks, but this really only has 10 hours of work assigned to it. It's something that's going to occur over the next 2 weeks, but we're only going to spend about 5 hours a week working on it, all right? So duration and work does not always have to match, and it shouldn't, all right? So if I come in here and say 2 days for my architecture sessions, I could say, well, we're really only going to spend maybe 10 hours on that, all right? Requirement session, maybe 2 weeks. And maybe we'll spend 20 hours defining the requirements for this project. Reports 1 day, and maybe we'll spend 3 hours on that. All right? Okay, so you get the idea here that you need to give it a valid duration and a valid work estimate. You may have noticed when I first typed in a new task that it automatically gave it a 1-day duration with a question mark after it. When you have the summary row 0 inserted in, if you have a question mark after this summary row of duration days here, you know that you forgot somewhere in here to give one of the tasks in your project an actual valid duration. So I would recommend that you scroll through the project plan to make sure that you didn't skip over something and that every task in your project has an accurate or a valid duration estimate attached to it. And you'll be able to see that again. If you have that summary row 0 created, everything would roll up to this and you would see a question mark after this. So you know to go back through this. Again, anything with 0 work and duration will automatically become a milestone in your project. Now, I mentioned earlier that you don't want to come in here and give your project a start date by typing or expanding the calendar in the start column. You go into the project information dialog box to set your project start date. Also, though, the same is for these project tasks here, all right? So when I type in a task in my project, you'll see that everything is starting on the same day here. Everything is actually starting on my project start date. all right? And that is by design. Everything starts on the 28th of October because that was my project start date. And the default setting is that all tasks will begin as soon as possible. So as soon as possible means on Wednesday the 28th, everything is going to start. Now, I don't want to then come in here and say, well, if this task is going to take 2 days and 10 hours, this task should be starting possibly on that following Monday. I'm not going to go ahead and type that information in here. What I want to do is create dependencies between my tasks. So you'll see here that there is a predecessor column already created. All right, so I could say that this milestone task is going to occur after this other task has been completed. All right, there's 2 ways that I could do that. Well, there's actually a bunch of different ways to do that, and I'll show you the 2 most common ways. Or actually the 3 most common ways. The first thing I could do is just highlight the rows here. All right, so I've highlighted both of these rows, and from a task ribbon or a task tab, I can use this linking button up here to link these tasks together. So you'll see here that without typing in a start and finish date, my dates have changed here based upon the dependency. Okay, if this task is going to take 2 weeks to complete and the milestone is going to occur after that 2 weeks, this task will then now start and finish on Tuesday, November 10th. All right, so, and you see the predecessor here lists the ID number, that's what the 2 is referencing, the ID number over here. All right, but so again, the easiest way to do it is to highlight multiple tasks if you wanted to and use this chain link. That is assuming the default dependency, which is a finish to start. So what that's saying is that this first task has to finish before we can start our milestone, right? So the milestone will never be started and finished before the actual tasks that come before it. All right, there are other dependencies though. We're not just limited to start to finish. So what I just did is I double-clicked on the row of this particular task so I can bring up this task information dialog box. And if I go to the predecessor tab, you'll see here that it's blank. But if I click on the task name, it's going to show me all the other tasks that are in my project plan. And what I want to do is link the start of this task to the finish of this milestone, right? So I've been asked in a lot of training classes, and let me just go ahead and drag this out of the way. I've been asked a bunch of times, well, why don't I just go ahead and link my summary tasks with a finish to start relationship throughout my project plan, because this is always going to show the earliest start and the last task finishing within that phase or that portion of my project. You can argue with me to the moon and back, but I will never say that's a good idea. It's actually against best practices, and since this is the Scheduling for Success webinar, we're going to say do not set predecessors or successors at the summary level, all right? Let these tasks move according to the subtasks and the dependencies within it. So let the duration roll up to your summary task. Let this calculate your start and your finish dates. Do not link summary tasks together, all right? So again, if you're using milestones properly, this milestone should be linked to the task that finishes the latest within this phase. Again, if you have a summary or a phase in your project that has maybe 15 tasks in it, and they're not necessarily in chronological order, so the start and finish dates may be all over the place, you have to look and see which task within that phase finishes the latest. That's the task that you link your milestone to. All right, so your milestone task should be the task that finishes last within that particular phase of your project. And if that has been done accurately, you can then link that milestone to the first task that start in the next phase. All right, so I'll go ahead and click OK, and we can see here, looks the same. We just see the 3, which is the ID number for the milestone over here, and we see the same arrows. These arrows are going from the beginning of the first task to the start of the second task there. Okay, so let's talk about Different dependencies, though. We don't always have to use a finish to start, which is a nice waterfall effect here on our Gantt chart, but if we're doing that, it may take forever for our project to finish. There's going to be times when tasks can happen concurrently. So in other words, we can have a start-to-start dependency. You'll see here, finish to start, and finish to finish. You also will have tasks that may need to finish concurrently. All right, so if I use the start to start and click OK, you'll see here the Gantt bars look a little bit different. And now I have a little bit different, the predecessor looks different. It has the number 5, again, the ID number, and then the S to S represents start to start. All right, because that is anything different from the default finish to start, you need to type in either S to S here or select it from that drop down. So if I wanted to say define reports, could also run concurrently at the same time. I could do that as well by just typing in a 6 SS. All right, my design complete. I could always say this is going to complete when, again, I need to look at the task that's going to finish the latest in here. So that would be task number 6 in this case, and I can say finish to finish. And you'll see here that this milestone is now set to finish when the last task in this particular phase will finish. All right, so these are driving my start and my finish dates here, the predecessors or the dependencies that I'm creating, not typing in start and finish dates, all right? And I'll talk about that when we talk about constraints next. But again, you're going to use the dependencies to drive those start and those finish dates. Now, let me also, for this particular one here, let's go back to architecture sessions. And let's say that we want this to start after the milestone has been completed. But maybe we need to put in an extra few days. If I was going to install Project Server and then configure it, the install, I would go ahead and schedule that. And maybe the configuration, I'd want to say, let's wait 3 days after the install to jump into configuration because maybe their hardware wasn't in place. Maybe the licenses were not procured prior to this. There's a lot of what ifs. So maybe I don't want to just schedule this to occur immediately after the task before it should finish. That's the ability to use lead and lag time, all right? So if I double click on this task again to open my task information dialog box, you'll see the predecessor tab has been selected. And you'll see over here that there is a lag column. Lag is the extra time that you put into a project to account for any unforeseen delays. The opposite of that is lead time. Let me just click on OK. And now you'll see here that it looks a little bit differently in the predecessor column. It has a +2 days. And I could have typed that in here directly without using the dialog box that I just used. But you'll see here it's not starting right away. It's waiting 2 days to start this next task. So it's giving me some extra time in my project plan, all right? The opposite of that is using lead time. So maybe you have tasks that have a finish to start relationship. So task 1 has to finish before task 2 can start. But maybe when we're 50% completed with task 1, we can go ahead and get started on task 2. We could either do that as a representative of, let me just insert a new task in here to show you what that can look like. Let's see. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Should have put myself on mute. Sorry about that. But let's go ahead and link these tasks with just a finish to start relationship there. All right, I could say that maybe when the previous task, number 7, is 50% complete, let's go ahead and get started on that. If I'm doing that, I do have to type in finish to start, even though it is the dependency. And I could go ahead and type in 50%. And now you'll see that project scheduled my next task to occur when the task before it was 50% complete. All right, so that's just another way of using lead time. You could either, I could have also said +1 day, -1 day or 2 days, a day before the task is scheduled to finish. Let's go ahead and get started on the next task. So these are important when we talk a little bit later about optimizing your project schedule, you're going to be looking at lead and lag time in your project plan to see if you can adjust those as well. All right, so again, we used our dependencies to set our start and finish dates. You may have noticed some change highlighting that's occurring. Anytime you make an edit to a task in your project plan and you see that blue change highlighting, you should take a look and see what was affected by it. That lets you know what tasks have changed according to the last edit that you made. All right, okay, so the next step in our scheduling for success, we've gone ahead, we've defined our project, gave it a start date, a calendar, the task mode, and the task type. Then we went ahead and we started typing tasks into our project plan. We gave it a duration and a work estimate. From there, we set some dependencies to start creating our actual project schedule here without typing in start and finish dates. I was saying don't type in a start and a finish date because what will happen is you would actually set what's called a constraint in a project plan. There are going to be times when you're going to need to set constraints or deadlines in a project plan. Maybe you have a resource that's going to be hired next month, so you can't start that task any earlier than the hire date, or maybe you have equipment being delivered, so you can't complete that task before the equipment is going to be delivered, all right? So those are examples of when you may need to constrain tasks in your project. A constraint is a limitation or a restriction that you're placing on the scheduling of a task. So you do want to use them sparingly. You do not want to use constraints, again, on summary tasks, all right? Leave your summary tasks alone, but we'll go ahead and I'll show you how you can properly set a constraint for a task. Let me just show you, though, what can happen here. Let's say I wanted to constrain this task and I wanted to say that this task actually has to finish on November 16th. I can go ahead and type that in there and navigate away. You'll see here it's still showing the 17th because based on the dependencies that I have in here, it's saying that it won't finish before then. But what I want to point out to you is, and that's because you'll see that I typed in the 17th because, well, I typed in the 16th as the date that I set because I needed to finish this task by the 16th. But you'll see that my date did not change here, all right? And that's because what I did is I told project the task has a finish no earlier than date of the 16th. That was not my intention. What I really wanted to do is say it cannot finish any later than the 16th. So that's one example of why you don't want to type start and finish dates. What project will assume is it's a start no earlier than or a finish no earlier than. So it's perfectly fine if it finishes beyond the 16th, but it won't finish any earlier than that. So the best way to use constraints in your project is to, again, double-click on the name of the task to get this task information dialog box again. From the predecessor, we'll navigate to the Advanced tab. You'll see that there is a constraint type box here, and then this will list all the constraints. By default, all tasks begin as soon as possible, unless you tell project differently. So if I wanted this to be a finish no later than, the proper way to do this is to set it here so that there is no ambiguity as to what constraint type you are choosing or selecting. So you'll come in here, you'll select the constraint that you want, and then you can actually select the constraint date, which was the Monday the 16th. All right, now if I click on OK, I have to pay attention to these. The first button is going to cancel out for me. No, I want to continue, and I want to finish no later than constraint. It's just letting me know that based upon the dependencies and the work and duration estimates that I have in my project, logically that task is not going to finish on the 16th, but if you force me to, I'll go ahead and set that constraint for you. And then I can click OK, continue, click OK, there we go. And now you'll see my date change to the 16th, and my calendar icon changed. It now has a red dot in it, and it now will say it has a finish no later than constraint. All right, so that's the proper way to set a constraint, not changing your start and your finish dates in here. There's also something else that I could have done. Instead of using constraints in my project, I can use deadlines. All right, so deadlines can monitor slippage in a project plan. Deadlines do not interfere with the scheduling engine. They have no effect on the scheduling engine. So they work a little bit differently. So if I come in here and double click, again, I can set this back to as soon as possible. That will actually remove my constraint from here. All right, so now my constraint's gone. And if I double click back in there, I can set a deadline. All right, let's say, do you want to set that deadline for, is it this, whoops, let me drag this out of the way. I think it's November 16th, right? Yeah. All right, well, let me leave it as November 17th because I want to show you what that looks like. All right, click OK. So now I'm setting a deadline. All right, so I don't see an icon over here, right? But I do see an arrow over here on my Gantt chart. This will let me know when my deadline date is for this task. So if this task starts to slip in my project plan, I will then get an icon over here. So actually, these are pretty good to use for your milestones. So if you wanted to set deadline dates for your milestones, maybe when you're first creating your project plan, this is my initial plan finish date. Let's set a deadline date for this date so that I know if I'm start to slip early on in my project, I'll be able to see how it's affecting future milestones in my project plan. I'm going to go ahead and just set it for this task since I've already done that. I'm going to set the deadline to be earlier than the date that it currently is. All right, and now you'll see, I don't see any change here. It's still a green arrow, but it's very difficult to see now. But I do get an indicator over here. It goes past its deadline on 11/16. So based upon my current schedule or my current progress in my tasks in my project plan, I'm going to miss that deadline. So you can very early on see how any early slippage might be affecting future milestones in your task, in your project plan, excuse me. So deadlines are great to use. They don't constrain the task in any way. They're just there for an alert to let you know of some possible slippage there. All right. Okay. So now that we've done that, the next step, we've got our work estimates or duration estimates, is to actually assign resources to tasks in our project. You'll see there is a resource name column. It's blank because I haven't built my team yet. Now, if you are using Project Standard, you can go to a resource sheet view and manually type in names of resources. Once you've done that, those names will appear in that drop-down that I just showed you. However, I am connected to my dev server, so I'm going to actually build my team from the enterprise here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and add my resources. It's going to take a second to open up here. All right, I'm just going to select a couple of people to add here. All right, click OK. Now you'll see my resource sheet is populated based on the information in my enterprise resource pool. I am connected to the server, so I am using enterprise resources. If you're using Project Standard, you're just going to be typing in Barry Johnson and any rate information that you have. All right. Going back to my Gantt chart view so I can look at my resources here. You'll see here, now there's a bunch of different ways that I can assign resources. I could just come here and use the drop-down, okay, and select this person. I also could use the split view details box. But what I'd like to show you is the Assign Resource dialog box. So I'm going to click on the Resource tab over here. I'm going to go to Assign Resources. And you'll see here, I like this box because it stays open as I click around. So I don't have to open and close it each time I make a resource assignment. I can come in here, I could actually also assign Barry to this task too. Then I can jump to this next one, assign Barry, etc. All right. You'll also see here units. I can adjust the units for my resources as well if I needed to. All right. So once I close, you'll see that I have my resources assigned to my task. If I double click on this, you can also see from the Resource tab in my Task Information dialog box that you should be familiar with by now, I could also say for this task, let's go ahead and say he's 50% available. All right. If your enterprise resources are all coming in at 100%, that means they're fully dedicated 8 hours a day to working on tasks in your project plan. That's not a reality. We all know that Barry's not going to spend 8 hours a day on my project alone, so I need to adjust his units, probably at the task level, so that my tasks don't start slipping, and project will assign him to work on these tasks or give it a duration that reflects his availability there. All right. Okay. The red people mean he's over allocated. All right. That's what that's referring to there. But that's like a whole nother session. We'll have to do one on effective resource management. Okay. So we went ahead. We assigned resources to our tasks, or some of them at least. We don't want to assign resources to summary tasks. If he's assigned to this task, which rolls up to this, what will happen is you're double counting. We don't want to have a resource assigned to your summary task. So your summary task should not have predecessors, and it should not have resources. All right? So no summary tasks there. Okay. No resources on summary tasks. Excuse me. Okay, so once we've done that, we can identify the critical path of our project. All right, so let's take a look and see what tasks might be on our critical path here. So I'm already in a Gantt chart, and if I drag this over, you'll see that all my Gantt bars are blue. So I make some changes, though, to quickly visualize what may be on my critical path. One of the easiest ways is to go to a Format ribbon from a Gantt chart and check critical tasks. When I check this checkbox, everything, in which case every single task in my project, is on the critical path. So now I'm in trouble, because if everything's on the critical path, that means that if one task slips, my project finish date will slip. All right, but again, all I did was select the critical task checkbox on the Format ribbon up top. I actually have another view that I prefer. Instead of using the Gantt chart, I like to use a tracking Gantt. A tracking Gantt will display my critical tasks, all right? So if I had non-critical tasks, they would show up in blue. Anything that's critical would be in red, okay? So that, again, is a tracking Gantt view. This is a default view that's in here with project. And also I could apply a different table if I wanted to. I could apply a tracking table as well. So I can see where I am as far as percent complete. All right, so a tracking Gantt with a tracking table. I'm going to go back to the entry table because that's the default table. I also could look at a network diagram. Network diagram will always display your critical tasks in red as well. All right, so the network diagram is another helpful view that will display your critical tasks. So network diagram, Gantt chart view, if you select critical tasks, or a tracking Gantt view, where you can come in and take a look at your critical tasks as well. All right, so those views are helpful. Again, if you have a lot of tasks on your critical path, you might want to come in here and take a look at some of these predecessors, maybe adjust any lag time, get rid of that +2 days so that you can stay back on schedule, etc. You're going to have to reevaluate this throughout the life of your project there. All right, so be careful of that. Okay, so now that you've gone through and taken a look at the critical path, you're going to also want to update your project, all right? You're going to be entering progress information before you accept any updates or modify any actuals directly in your project plan, whether you're using the percent complete buttons or you're going to a usage view and putting the actual hours that people spent against the task, or you're accepting updates from a timesheet or a task page. The first thing that you need to do is to baseline your project. All right, so you'll see on my project tab or my project ribbon is the set baseline button over here. The reason why you want to set a baseline is you need to take a snapshot of what you plan to happen and compare it against what's actually happening in your project plan. And I get a lot of folks that say, well, we don't really use baselines, we don't use this, or we don't use that. And then they'll also complain to me how their work is changing based upon the actuals that are being entered into their project plan. So your work will change based upon the actual work that's entered. So if I was to enter, if I insert, let me cancel out of here for a sec. So if I actually insert the actual work column, okay, there we go. Anytime I enter actual work, my work will adjust to reflect the actual work in the project plan. So if you want to see what your original planned work was, you have to set a baseline to be able to see that information. You have 11 baselines. It starts with baseline 0. All right, so let's just use baseline 0. I'm going to baseline the entire project. The reason why you would use selected tasks is, let's say I go ahead and baseline this project. A week later, I get a scope change, and I have a whole entire new phase to add to my project. And I've already accepted some updates to my project, so I've made some changes to the work has changed, the actual work is being entered, etc. I don't want to overwrite the existing baseline. I just want to incorporate those selected tasks into an existing baseline. You can by just highlighting the selected tasks that might be new and then clicking the second radio button. And if you do that, you want to make sure these two checkboxes are checked. For this, we're just going to baseline the entire project here. All right, I didn't see any changes there, but if I go here and take a look, I can see that my baseline was saved. All right. Where I would see this information is in a tracking Gantt view, that favorite view that I just mentioned a moment ago. If I go to a tracking Gantt view, I can see my baseline bar information. All right, let me show you how. If I go to a scroll to task, it brings everything into view. Okay, I just clicked on this button over here on the task tab. I added this to my quick access toolbar because I use it all the time. Baseline bars. Actual task, all right? When the work increases, these top bars get bigger, baseline bars always stay the same. When the task starts to slip, the bars shift to the right. If I'm ahead of schedule, the bars will shift to the left, all right? This is the only way for you to be able to track your true project progress there. The other thing, too, is I inserted an actual work column in here. I do recommend that you use that. You also might you also might want to use actual duration or remaining duration. So if you have a remaining duration column in here as well, I recommend that you update these or use these fields to update information in your project. Again, this also depends if you're connected to Project Server and you're using timesheets or a task page. If you're not and you're just used to marking things as % complete, Project will make the assumption, if I mark this as 100% complete, that this started on Friday the 13th and it finished on the 19th and it took 26 hours. If that's not correct, what I could have done is put the actual work in here. Maybe it only took me 20 hours. All right, if it only took me 20 hours, I would like to capture that information in my project because that means that my work, I'm under budget on work here. All right, so my indicator, if I was using those for work, would show up as green. All right, so using actual work or remaining duration is a lot more accurate than just marking tasks as % complete up here. All right, so I do recommend that you try and use the actual work or remaining duration fields to do that. All right, let me show you just a couple more things. Let me go to my project ribbon and then we'll open up for questions. From my project ribbon, you'll see here that I have a status date. That's NA right now because there is no status date. You might be wondering why or when you would use this. You would use this if you're tracking earned value. If you are tracking earned value in your project, so your resources have assigned costs to them and your resources are working on these, again, you have to have baseline information in here to track earned value. All right. Status date, if I don't put 5 p.m. after this, it'll default to 12 a.m. on 10/4 on the 14th of Wednesday. All right. So I would need to give it, if I want it through the end of the day, I would have to put 5 p.m. after this date right here. Okay. So status dates are effective or useful when you are I probably shouldn't have used that date. That's silly because that's today. Let me make that. I didn't even start my project yet. Let me go ahead and do next month. Let's do, or at least a few days into this. Okay. Earned value, again, if you're tracking earned value, you would use that status date. The other thing, if you want to reschedule uncompleted work through the status date, it's going to look for that. You don't see any information over here. If I right-click on my Gantt chart and click on grid lines, I have to scroll down to status date. It's in here. It's just hidden. And then I could say, just show me a line, and let's make it red so it stands out. All right, so it's a grid line, status date, I did the type and the color, and I click OK, and now I can see my project status through this particular date. Again, it's used for tracking earned value. Also, if you want to reschedule uncompleted work through a particular status date, you could do that. Let me show you what this is, and this will be the last thing we talk about. Any work that was supposed to have happened in the past that has not happened, or in other words, I was supposed to work on a task last week. This particular project, this is current, so there's really no work that was scheduled to happen in the past. There are going to be times when your resources were supposed to complete something last week and they did not. You will need to reschedule that work in your project. I usually go in on Fridays and reschedule uncompleted work to start after that date. So the following week, my resource work will be pushed out. So if it didn't happen in the past, it'll stay in the past unless you reschedule it to occur after a certain time. So why you might want to do that? Well, because if it didn't happen in the past, your resources still need to work on it. Now they have to work on these tasks plus the other tasks that they're currently assigned to. So you get a better overall picture of your resource availability and their allocation if you are rescheduling work that was not completed from the past. All right, so again, that's a project that is coming through and rescheduling uncompleted work to start after a specified date. Tasks that were supposed to have been completed in the past that have not been completed should be rescheduled. You'll see that my project finish date did change. I see change highlighting. Now my project is finishing later because these tasks have been pushed out. All right, so, all right. Actually, in this case, it looks like this wasn't necessarily pushed out, so I'm in good shape. All right, let me go ahead. I'm going to stop sharing, only because I can't fully see my chat window here. All right. So let me go ahead and see if there are any questions. And also, ooh, you know what? I do want to share one more thing with you. Sorry. Let me do this real quick. I want to show you. Here we go. We are promoting a new class. We are going forward, have classes once a month that you can register for. So when you go to register for a webinar, you'll see that there's a full day class. It's going to be on November 20th, which is the last Friday before Thanksgiving week, and it's from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. So if you need some help, or if I was going way too fast for my presentation today within this hour, come back and join us. You can see there's a lot to learn from Microsoft Project. All right, so sorry, I had to give that shameless plug in there. Right now, you'll be prompted if you try and register. All right, let me just look in here. If you try and register for it, you're not going to be able to pay for it, but don't worry, Amanda on my team will contact you and obtain that payment information for you. Okay, so I did just get one question, master projects, to view resource allocation and scheduling across multiple projects using Project Professional 2013. It looks like that's the only one that I see on here. let me just go back to sharing again. Yeah, you can use a master project to display your project schedule. Let me just see if my project's still open here. There we go. You have the ability of inserting, if you wanted to, a sub-project into what's called a master project. So maybe you open up a blank project, and then you insert sub-projects into one project so that you can go to a resource allocation, resource usage view, etc. I would have to select which project I want to insert into here, click on Insert. Those projects would then be inserted in here, and I would be able to go to a task usage view or a resource usage view and see those projects. But let me also show you too, let's see, I don't think I have. If you're using Project Professional, and when you open Project Pro initially, there is a checkbox that's called Load Project Summary Resources. And if you have that checkbox selected, I would be able to see other projects and assignments listed here in a resource usage view for Barry or for any other, for Ari as well. So a resource usage view, if you're connected to Project Server, will also display other projects and assignments. So you can see why my resource might be red here, because he probably has other projects and assignments going on. Let me stop sharing real quick for a second, because I just had another one, a question about the webinar. Yes, this webinar will be available for playback. I have been recording it. Another thing that I'll point out too, I'm looking through to see if we have any other questions. I know it's a few minutes past 1, so if you need to drop off, by all means. But also check our website for our blog posts as well. We've been putting a lot of stuff out there recently with the rollout of Project 2016. So you'll be able to find some useful information there as well. So in addition to these webinars, check out our blogs as well. There's a lot of information on tips and tricks that we've learned, problems that we've run into, some helpful hints that it will be very informative for you. So you might also want to use our website for that too. All right, let me see. Webinar that covers the creation of custom reports. Oh, actually, Melinda's saying email her. So what you would do is go to the project, our website, and email her. She will then send you the link for the recording. So click on that Contact Us button, say, can I please have a copy of today's webinar's recording, and she'll go ahead and send that to you. I apologize for that misinformation there. Yes, we're going to have a webinar in the future in December. We're toying with dates because December could be like a ghost town for a lot of these events because everybody kind of checks out for that month. If not, if we don't have a high number of people registering, we can push it out to January. But yes, we're going to go ahead and set up a session that focuses just on reporting. So you'll have that opportunity to see that posted as well. So check back, because a lot of times when we get input from folks, we'll change the webinar schedule. So visit our website often, check out what's upcoming. You might be pleasantly surprised. We might change some lineup. And also, feel free to register for that class, please. We want to see what type of interest we have in online training. So if we get a lot of interest, we'll be promoting a lot more classes. And based upon your input, we can adjust that as well. So go ahead and contact us, give us that information. Your feedback is going to be well received, and we'll be happy to accommodate you. But I want to thank everybody for joining me today. Again, my name is Laura Crawford, and I really appreciate you joining us for today's presentation. And please, please give us some feedback and join us again. All right, since I don't have any other further questions, I'm going to go ahead and say thank you. You could always go to events@intigent.com to see what's upcoming. You can also email us any requests at that email as well. All right, thank you, everyone. I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and hope you join us for our next presentation in 2 weeks. Thank you.